So I'm opening it up to questions. First off, does anybody have questions about National Register eligibility, the determination process?
Hi, Erin.
Yes.
This is Susan Picard, and I'm working with the town of Ausable for the Civic Center for a rehab project. And the Civic Center is in the historic district. And I know that makes it appropriate in that way. When I researched the information, you can download the entire form, and the front sheet says that it was approved for historic designation, or the historic district was approved in 1983. And I guess I'm wondering, how much of that whole thing do you want attached to the application? Because there's a part near the end of the application that you ask for that determination.
And so you're asking whether you would need to attach the entire historic district designation form?
Sure, or just the front where it says it was approved and signed off on, and it gives the date. It was 1983, I believe.
I think it would be, that's a very good question. I think it depends a little bit on how big that document is. There is some benefit to having the entire nomination form. But if it's too large to upload, having the front page and also the page that lists the Civic Center building,
Okay, that
would be adequate.
I had saved off both of those pages separate from the rest of the application, thinking that you would want to read the descriptor for the Civic Center also. So, okay, yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. There's some questions in the chat. And one of the questions is, does the building have to be in the Adirondacks? It does not have to be within the blue line of Adirondack Park of the Forest Preserve, but it does need to be in one of those counties that I mentioned. And if you are asking about a specific location, if you want to ask about that spot, you can, but it's within those North Country counties that I listed. If you have funds already awarded through the New York Main Street program, can use this for a match if the work has been completed. No, it has to be for new work. So the project that you're applying for is a new project. It can be a separate phase of an existing project, but if you have a multi-phase project where you got Main Street money for a roof that's already on, and then you're seeking funding for a facade work, apply to us for the facade phase of the project. And if you can get Main Street money for that facade phase, that's great, but this isn't a retroactive grant program. And we will need some detailed drawings for the application and the proposed work. The more details, the better, so that we can understand your project, and so that the Park Service can review it, because the National Park Service will be reviewing these for project appropriateness and adherence to the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation.
So, Erin?
Yes.
Will this be an ongoing project? Like, will this be offered again like next year?
We are offering this grant round now, and if we spend all of the money in this that we have in this round, which is a bit over $600,000, then there will not be a second round. If we don't get applications enough that can be funded, that can use up all of our funding, then we will have a second round. But it's not, we have one pot of money, and when it's out, this program concludes unless we can find additional money and move forward. But that's not, right now for this program and this set of applications, it's, we're anticipating we'll probably spend it all in a single round. But if we don't, we will certainly have a second one and let everybody know.
Okay, thank you.
Buildings in towns that don't have hamlets. Yes, if it's a center of the community, hamlets are not really they're not incorporated places. So if you have a Four Corners that has a center, a center of the population, so to speak, reach out to us, and if you have kind of more specific information, that's the idea, is that it's it's meant to be about investing in a building that will draw community and draw people. And I'm just pasting in the secretary standards here. A Main Street project that is a mix of public, commercial, and residential uses. It will depend a bit on what the project is and what percentage you're seeking funding for, what the residential mix is. So I would say in that instance, if you could focus the project application on the public component, if there's something that the public space needs, and kind of separate out the residential component into a separate phase, that would probably be the best. So a math question, 100,000 is the most that can be awarded, a 25% match of us. So if 100,000 is from the Rural Revitalization Program and 32,250 from the grantee, I'm assuming your math is correct. And yes, so yes, it's the joint total. It was not 100. 100 is the maximum grant award that you can get. I'm just going to take Rachel's question. I see Rachel's hand raised.
Hi. Yeah, I have two questions. So my first is regarding what's considered public space. Would a building that has a space that's used for paid private classes be considered public? Because it's not as straightforward as like it's a cafe or it's a museum, or it's technically open to the public, but you have to pay to use it,
And do you offer any like art openings that the public can go to, or I think that would technically count.
Okay.
But you really need to have some way that the public can walk in and engage. So like a bookstore, you're not required to buy something in order to walk in.
Right.
If it's locked to the street and you buzz and you're only let in if you are paying, it's a little murky. I would say it might not be. Yeah, I think that's a little murky. I think you'd want to make the case that this was something that had some open community benefit.
Okay. And is that
even
something?
If it's like a first Friday, we're open, once a month kind of thing.
Okay. And is that something that they could detail as a plan going forward in the application if it's something they haven't already been doing?
Yes, especially if this grant would help them make the investments needed to create that opportunity.
Okay. And then my other question is just if you could give like the cliff notes of what we need to look into to determine if a property could be eligible to be listed.
I'll send that over to Chelsea.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
So National Register listing, we look at 4 criteria of significance. So you don't need to meet all 4 criteria, you just need to fall in one. One's, social basically social history or events associated with a location. One is architecture, design, engineering associated with a building. One is archaeology, which probably wouldn't be the case of what we're looking at here. And then the last one is association with a specific person. So when you submit an eligibility determination to my office, what we typically require for that initial submission is photo documentation of the building, both interior and exterior. And you don't need to go crazy. I don't need 100 photos, please. And then also a little bit of information about the building. So some context, approximate year of construction, if you know any history involving the building, what it was used for, information like that. So we'll take that information in, take a look at it. If we have some questions, we might reach back out to you to try to understand the building a little better. And then that would result in an eligibility determination, which is different than a nomination. A nomination is much more extensive. It requires a lot more research, but the determination will get you started in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jean Marie.
Thank you. To Chelsea, our building is over 100 years old and it's gone through a few rehabilitations to the structure and the front. I was wondering how that can affect eligibility.
Sure. So it gets a little not complicated, but it does come into play to some degree. If the building is only significant under criterion C, architecture, then integrity has to be much pretty strong. So I don't know the extent of the alterations that have been done to your building, but if they start to pile up enough that the historic integrity of the building has been altered and all you're going for is significance under architecture, that could definitely play a factor. If the building is significant in other ways, say for its local use, as a prominent meeting place for the community, or, maybe a municipal building for the community or something like that, that's a different criteria, criterion A. So the building does still have to have historic integrity, but there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of alterations that have happened over time. It's not to say that they can't still pile up and just, cause a not eligible determination, but there's more weight on the context of the building as opposed to the architectural integrity at that point.
Thank you. We are an arts center, so it's been used as a community place and as an arts center for over 55 years. So it's a catchy balance. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
There's a couple of questions about following up on my comment about repairing first and then replacing in kind. So I would say again, if you have one question was about wood, and it seems like maybe it's floor. So if you have a wooden floor that can be repaired, can it be sanded and stained and used? That would be the best option. The question is, could a type of laminate be used in terms of being eligible for our funding? Probably not. You would have to explain why, if you have a floorboard that needs to be replaced, then replace it with the same kind of wood. It would be, there would be a bit of a case-by-case basis on that, but we want things that have to be replaced with the same kind of material that they were originally. So no vinyl siding, no vinyl windows. Christine, can you think of another good do and don't example?
Well, I think if there's like finishes that are sort of integral to the building, such as, maybe historic plaster, or maybe there's some sort of unique woodworking, there's a unique stair railing with intricate wood detailing, to just replace it with a common railing or something like that. I guess it's really character defining elements. And that could be paint finishes or something very elaborate like detailed woodworking.
Excellent. Do you need drawings for interior work? I mean, I would say that if you're doing extensive interior work, we would want to be able to understand the work that you're doing. So your drawings and your illustrations for your project are going to communicate to us what your plans are. And in order to put your best foot forward for the grant, you're going to want us in the National Park Service to understand exactly what you're doing, what materials you're using. And so the better that you can provide those in the form of drawings and plans, the better. And yes, you could install a restroom in a historic building. That does not count as new construction. But you would want to install it in a place that didn't adversely affect the building. So I'm trying to use rather extreme examples, but let's say you have a building with a beautiful hall and a monumental stair with a beautiful wooden banister, and you demolish the stairwell and put a restroom in the middle of the hallway. That would not be something that we would probably look favorably on in terms of funding. And if your historic building has an addition and you're looking for funding for the original structure in the addition, I think it would depend, is the addition part of the eligibility determination for the National Register. If the building's on the National Register, eligible for the National Register, then the building is eligible for the National Register. I think you have to kind of describe, what that was, and it doesn't have to be the buildings evolve over time. So that might be a bit dependent. And annotated photographs, again, it's how well those photographs communicate what you're doing. And it's, again, about putting your best foot forward in terms of explaining what you're going to be doing as part of this project. And if the interior has been gutted, I think, again, you might want to look at what you would be, like the historic tax credit, for example. If you are starting from a place where you don't have historic interiors, they don't necessarily make you put that back. But we would want to have a conversation about what your intentions were for the interior and how that fit with the building. So if you were going to close up windows and change the building envelope, that would probably not qualify. But if you were putting in a new use for an interior of a historic building, that would be a conversation I think we could have. That doesn't automatically make it ineligible. Again, it has to be eligible for the National Register. So if it's not already eligible for the National Register individually and you don't have a historic interior, Chelsea, how would that fare?
So most likely, if you're not currently listed on the National Register and your entire interior has been gutted to a point that there's no historic fabric left, you're probably not going to qualify for individual listing at that point, because individual listing looks at both the exterior and the interior. That is different from a district where the district nominations or eligibilities do not look at interiors of buildings.
And yes, installing handicap bathrooms in the building would absolutely be an accessible use of the funds. But again, installing those bathrooms in a sensitive way that so you couldn't put, it would not make the project competitive for this program if you were, or nor would it meet the Secretary's standards if you were installing handicap bathrooms in a school gymnasium and thereby carving up the gymnasium into multiple spaces so that it didn't look like a gym anymore. I think I've gotten to the end of all of the written questions. So Chelsea, could you walk through the steps if somebody hasn't, and you mentioned this already, I think of it in response to Jean Marie's, but if somebody has a building that is not eligible that they think could be, what's the first thing they should do?
So the first thing would be to get an initial submission into our system. We use a system called the Cultural Resource Information System, or CRIS for short. So you can submit electronic submission for a National Register application, and that would start the eligibility process for you. That submission is going to ask for what I already talked about. So it's going to ask for some historic context, and it's going to ask for photos, and then contact information for you or the owner, whoever's filling out the application. Once we receive that, then we might go back and forth a couple times, but that's the starting place.
And so I just put in the link to Chris, but is there a form? I think, have a link to the a form that's on your website for National Register eligibility.
Yep, so there are hard copy forms as well. I think it's called the preliminary information form. So you can start that way as well and mail it to our office. Just don't forget the photographs, because we need to see those as well. But if you don't want to use the hard copy, then the electronic submission process is also available to you as well.
And I'm just posting in a link to that form. And we have this information on our website as well, with links to.
Just people, talking about, drawings and what's required, try to think about it in terms of, if you were doing this project and you were hiring a contractor, what information would they need? What sort of specifications? How could you get an accurate estimate on the project? So as much detail that you can supply is not only works to your benefit, but also helps with the technical review process that the Park Service will be doing to fully understand your project. So think, there's never going to be too much information in terms of drawings, photographs, specifications for what you want to do.
Rachel, you have a.
I was just wondering what the estimated turnaround is on this. So once someone submits an application, when can they expect to hear back about the application? How quickly can they begin construction? Those kinds of just general timeline details.
So the application deadline is in August. It's August 11th. And we have our reviews, and then we have to send our selected grantees that list and all of the technical review materials to the National Park Service. So we hope that we can announce our grant recipients by November of 2023, so by November of this year. And then so that people can spend the winter getting everything ready to go for the construction season in 2024.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And yes, for projects that are already Park Service approved, we would send our package of our recommended grant awards to the National Park Service, and that's the complete package. Whether it's been reviewed or not, they want to see everything that we're putting forward for use of these funds. So it would go before the Park Service again for review, although theoretically it would be an easy approval if it's already been approved. And in terms of project timing, if it's a piece of a larger project that's underway, separate out the piece for which you're applying to us for funding. So if you're working on interiors and siding and roof, but you have a porch that needs to be fixed, apply to us, and you're not working on that yet, apply to us for the porch that needs to be fixed. And you can describe how it's a piece of a larger project, but it's the porch that it needs to be fixed that you're applying to us for. So in your budget, if that porch costs $50,000, you'd be applying to us for a grant, around $37,500. So that would be the way that would work, if that makes sense. So you would separate out the phase or the piece of the project that you're applying to us for. I don't know about town employees doing the work and the town getting paid. This would be if it's a town-owned building and they are seeking funding for work, there would be a procurement process, and we would have to think about that. There might be an element of showing the need for the grant as well. So you would, and I don't know what kind of procurement process the town would have to follow in terms of getting paid. So that might be a good one to talk about more individually, but you could show, the town could show in its budget the cost of the work. And if it didn't need to go out for competitive bid, then the budget is the cost to the town of the project. But you would want to show the need for the grant, that this wouldn't be coming out of the town's, if the town has the money to do it in the first place. So it's all about making the case for why the funding is needed. And you don't need to, so this is happening ahead of bidding and procurement. So you don't have to identify the contractor ahead of time. And our July 10th session, question and answer will go into greater details about procurement. But as Christine said, this is showing us what you're planning on doing, and in anticipation of hiring a contractor to do this work. We're assuming that nobody has hired a contractor yet because you don't have the funding. So you're not entering into a contract with somebody who's going to do this work because you don't have the money to do the work. So you will need to follow federal procurement guidelines, and and it's probably a good idea to get multiple bids for the work, which I see as a question. But there are some exceptions to that depending on region and availability, and we can go into more detail on that in our July 10th session. Are there any other questions? So in terms of the review criteria, I realized what I missed. I think I kind of skipped over it, was the adherence to the Secretary of the Interior standards. So it's submitting a complete application, following preservation practices, and that's what we've just been talking about in terms of repairing, replacing in kind, and then project appropriateness, fiscal and managerial capacity, and public benefit. And this is available on our website and in our program guidelines and application. Any other questions? We've got 15 minutes scheduled left. Chelsea and Christine, are there any like tidbits that you can think of that we can share?
In terms of eligibility determinations and everything like that, so the June 23rd deadline is there to give us a little time to review this, so you would have an answer prior to your submission for the application. If we go back and forth with these determinations, they can take a little longer, but typically we like to give responses back within 30 days of the initial submission. But like I said, if we have to go back and forth about questions, that could be a little longer, but that's generally our timeline. Other than that, if you have specific questions about eligibilities or how to submit, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I can give Erin my contact information so that she can distribute it accordingly. But always happy to chat about any buildings or questions you might have.
The only thing I can add too is that, you know, if you have a question whether your building is already on the register, that's something, of course, Chelsea can help you with that, but that is also something that you can contact our office, and we can help you see if your building is already listed either individually or part of a district. And also, anyone, if you feel free to reach out to Erin or myself if you do have questions about the program or anything via our email, and you know, we can try to help you with any of those questions.
And I'm putting our email in the chat. This is the email that goes that's specifically for questions about this program. Confirming the contract term. We don't know exactly when the contract term will begin, so it might not be January 1st, but yes, the project will need to conclude by the end of June in 2025. So I can't guarantee when the contract will begin, but that is the hard deadline. So they have to conclude by June 30th, 2025. And I'm going to put in a plug again for photography. It makes a very big difference what photographs you include of your building. We want to see your entire building. We want to understand where it exists in relationship to its community. And we want to understand through the photographs where the work needs to happen. So show us where there is deterioration or where there's need for repair, where a bathroom would go. So paint the picture, tell the story through the photographs. And the review panel will probably not know your building. They may not even know your community. So tell the story both in your words and through your pictures. And I can't underscore the importance of that enough. And I would say in terms of National Register eligibility, that's also true. You know, again, the person looking at your eligibility determination request, the person looking at your grant application might not know your building, might not know your community. And the more you can do to share the best pieces of all of that with us, the better. And when I say the best, it can be the part that needs the repair, you know, as well. So, you know, the best that shows why you need this grant. But do also show us an overall image of the building. You can take the pictures with your phone. It doesn't have to be professional photography standards, but we really do need to understand, you know, what needs to be done and where. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. We can wrap this up. I don't want to take up any more of your time. We have the registration list for this Zoom meeting, and so we can send out the PowerPoint, and then you'll have our email address and our contact information through that. So if you have any questions, you can reach back out to us. We really appreciate everybody being here today. Well, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today and thanks for your interest in our program.